is up, everybody? This is the Vineyard podcast that we call The Ferment, and my counterpart from the UK is here with me today, Jimmy Cooke. What's up, Jimmy?
Yeah, man. Great to see you, man.
We're in America.
We are.
I know, and you're here drumming at a conference for us. So, number one, thank you for coming over.
Oh, thanks for having me, man.
I'm pretty sure that a lot of the folks in the UK know who you are. Like, you're at all their conferences, you do their things. But maybe there's some Vineyard Worship folks here who are aware that there's Vineyard Worship UK, but
right.
Maybe they don't really know what that is.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't really know what you do or who you are. Can you just fill us in a little bit? Give us the lay of the land.
Yeah. So there is a Vineyard Worship label in the UK and Ireland. We are also in a partnership with Integrity Music, same as you guys.
Yeah.
And we started a little later. So late 90s. First record was 98, I think.
What was the first record?
Come Now's the Time. Yeah.
Oh, that was the first record.
That was it. Yeah, which just turned 25. Yeah, it started on a banger. Yeah. So yeah, it's been going like 25 years, I believe. Sorry about my voice. I'm a little scratchy, folks. Yeah, so my job is really purely to kind of manage the label and the publishing piece of Vineyard Worship UK.
So whenever there is a song written that gets put through the Vineyard channels or the Integrity channels, it comes through your desk and your email.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I lean hard on Steve Harding at Integrity. He's a great friend. He's got great ears. So we tag team, the song development piece.
That's right. Well, we should probably just back up because you weren't always doing what you do now.
Right.
Tell everybody where you're from and just what life was like when you were growing up.
Yeah, man. So my folks, we came from a rural part of the UK, the Cotswolds, which is, I've lived all over the UK, honestly, but
that sounds very English.
It's very English.
To my American ears, that sounds as English as it gets.
Imagine the Shire. And take a left out of the Shire and you'll hit the Cotswolds.
Yes.
So my folks got saved in the early 80s, right around the time that Wimber was bringing teams over. And when I say teams, I think I'm right in saying that was like 400 people would come from Southern California and minister and do conferences here in the UK. And I don't know if folks know the story of that, but it really changed the landscape. And you can still feel that change. It changed the church.
Were your folks Church of England?
They weren't really anything, honestly.
Yeah, they got saved. They're just in a non-denom Brit church, but they became aware of Wimber.
Yeah, so then they started a home group in our house, and then they started coming over to Anaheim Vineyard for conferences, and my folks are all-in people, so they were, Vineyard merch, caps and sweatshirts and I think they joined Club Vineyard, so the music started rolling through to our little house every 3 months, so that was big for me.
And how old were you?
I would have been 7, 8, 9, and then we went over to Anaheim in 87 as a family, and then again in 93. So those were really formative moments, man. The 93 one was, Casey Coram was also there, actually. It was a big parking lot. They did doing the stuff, youth conference in the parking lot. Loads of the New Breed bands were playing. We just had a great time. And I remember walking past a room with an open, it was like a fire door had been left open or something. And I looked through and I was like, oh, there's the studio. That's where they make the records, right?
Yeah.
In there. And thinking like, that's cool.
Oh, okay.
That's magical.
That's when the hooks got in you.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, and around that time, our worship pastor, so our home church was St. Albans Vineyard, north of London, and we had an amazing swirl of creative people coming in and out. So Mark James, Samuel Lane, Sam's sister, Jessie.
Yeah.
A lot of songs came out of that church. There was our worship pastor was a guy, at the time, he's still around, beautiful guy, friend, Graham Ward, and he was incredibly pastoral and just poured himself into the young folk in that church. And so he actually was making a record with his band around that time. He had a band called the Wesley Brothers. And he was making a record at Martin Smith's studio down in the South Coast, where they were beginning to record. I think they just recorded Cutting Edge 1 and 2. So I skived school for a day, went down.
You just skipped?
Yeah, I skipped out. I jumped in the car with those guys. I went down to the studio, and they were just finishing up vocal overdubs. And I was just, fly on the wall, nervous kid, just soaking it all up, the console and the tape machine. And I just thought the whole thing was magical, man. I was enthralled by recording.
Were you playing music at this point?
Yeah, I was playing drums, and I was soaking up a lot of a weird hybrid of all the Seattle music coming out. Absolutely loved, Pearl Jam, Nirvana.
Yeah, you're that age.
Soundgarden, right? Yeah, Rage Against the Machine.
Yes,
all of that kind of stuff in a strange cocktail with Vineyard Worship. So Touching the Father's Heart 12 came out, and The Violet Burning took half. They took side B, and they had been over and played in the UK. And I honestly, a lot of those records were really important for us in the UK. A lot of the songs just gave us language and form to worship, and it was a great time. Yeah.
Okay, so what I hear in your story is mom and dad get saved, meet Wimber, they're all in people, let's go to Anaheim. These are formative experiences for you. You're seeing the studio, it feels magical. At the same time, you're at a church at St. Albans that is creative, it's loaded with talent.
Right.
And a pastor who is like, let's do this.
Yeah. And
so was that the sort of cocktail that made you feel like you could do this, or you?
Yes. Yeah.
Seeded you with that?
So Sam Lane's dad and mum ran that church, and they gave so much permission and freedom to the worship crew and Graham to shape the culture and the values. And honestly, looking back, it was, they let things run. They really did.
Say more about that, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Because we kind of live in a moment now where you feel the schedule sometimes.
Right.
Which is fine.
We had, Sam's dad was, in the early days of the church, he was like, there was hardly any worship leaders around, so he would lead worship. He auditioned me on a Sunday night, and I was so nervous, dude. And I had my drums set up, and he said, come and play, and if it goes well, then you can stay for the evening, worship and play. And if it's not happening, then it's okay, you can just sit out. And
yeah.
So I was like, man, if I don't make this audition, we don't have time to get the drum set off the stage. Just everyone's going to know that I Yeah,
you didn't make it.
I didn't make it. So anyway, I got through that, and I was 12 years old, I think, when I started playing in church. So again, Chris was just, fair play to him. He would just pull in really young guys, and then I was playing every week because there was no one else.
Yeah.
And Graham Ward was amazing. Just, helped me with drum lessons. You've got to find a teacher, spent time with me. But we would have these worship nights where, because, it's one of those self-perpetuating situations where musicians are attracted by musicians, right? So
that's right.
They kind of hear that something's up in this church. You're welcome there. And, hey, you might get asked to play. Yeah. And so we had these amazing guitarists walk in, and sometimes the worship nights would be, we would do the kind of like, make it dark and spinny light, and we were trying.
And Chris was cool with this.
Chris was all about it, man. Yeah.
And he was cool with, like, turn the guitars up.
Oh, yeah. And sometimes it felt like we would go off somewhere else, and it would be like guitar jewels and just crazy jams. And I was learning so much as a musician, but I was having incredible moments with the Lord. You know,
And was Mark James in this swirl at this point, or was he later?
Came a little later, but not much later. When I met Mark, he was working in a pub, a live music venue in St Albans as the sound guy.
Yeah.
But people knew he was this like wild man with dreads and a great, like, he had an orange amp and I think he had a Strat at the time.
Yeah.
He was an incredible player, and he kind of had this presence about him. And I was in this pub. It was an open night. We'd often go to the Horn of Plenty, was the pub.
I love this.
We'd go to the Horn on a Sunday night after church.
The Cotswolds and the Horn of Plenty.
Yeah, this is not the Cotswolds.
This is mythology.
Yeah. So we'd be in the Horn of Plenty, and it was like open night. I was 15. I had no business being in a pub at 15.
Yeah, you had no business being a drummer at 12 at church either, right? It's just like, yeah.
It was crazy. So Mark just came over and sat down at my table, and I was like, you know, it's in the days when you could smoke cigarettes and you can barely see each other, you know, so much like cigarette smoke.
I love this.
He was like, man, I saw you play at church, and I'm thinking of starting a band, and I just want to play music where it's like, it's good music, but God comes and things happen in the room. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And just like that, we were a band, and we've been playing music for 30 years together now. We figured out.
When did Henry come?
Henry came a little later, quite a long time later, but Henry was a local legend before he picked up a bass guitar.
So give us a little bit of backstory on Henry, because this is fun for me.
Yeah. So Henry, I mean, those two guys are some of the most important men in my life, honestly. I love those guys like brothers. We have a lot of fun. Just a bit ahead of this trip, we were in Switzerland together, and we just have a great time hanging out. Deep friendship. Henry, as a young guy, was hilarious. I mean, he still is. He's one of the funniest people I know. He's edgy, but he can get away with saying outrageous things that I could never get away with, right? But people love him.
Yeah.
He's a vineyard pastor now. Yeah. Rock and Redeemer Church. He's a great Bible teacher. Yeah. He's one of those guys he's just full pursuit of Jesus. Yes. And Mark is the same, you know. It's inspiring to be around those guys. But yeah, we were young, doing all the stuff that you do when you're that age, and bumbling through, trying to figure out faith, trying to navigate how do we relate to girls, and you know, we're playing in bands, so how do we figure out the drugs and drinking thing, and following Jesus. And it was messy, man.
I love that, though. I love that image of you and Mark James sitting in the Horn of Plenty and smoking cigarettes. I mean, this is like, if we make a movie, this is in.
Yeah, I mean, it was, honestly, it felt like a really exciting time. I think there was a lot of new music springing up at that time. Prosh was over in the UK a lot, Kevin Prosh, and that was deeply inspiring, you know, and it was very jam orientated. So musicians loved it. I think other folks maybe struggled. Yeah. And then Cutting Edge came along. But a lot of the Vineyard guys were coming over as well. Jeff Searles, Andy Park would have been coming over. Brian, a little later, Brian Dirksen. Yeah. But Vineyard had a huge influence on the worship sound and aesthetic and values and the flow of worship, singing to God. The influence is undeniable, you know, and you could feel it at that time.
Well, okay, so talk to me about this. You're at this like creative and free church. Yeah. I just love this idea that there's this pastor who is letting things go, you know. There's something about that. And I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way, but I've just noticed that oftentimes where there's places of great creativity, there's a pastor who's giving more permission than maybe you even, and I'm using air quotes here, more than you should. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because there's a little bit of, this is our story in Vineyard Campbellsville. Because Ray Hollabach was like, he came to us musicians and he would give us a key to the church. And we would play anytime. We would just go in and play.
That's amazing.
And and we would bring our crazy drugged out friends in.
Yeah.
And we would jam. We all had bands. And what's wild is no one ever broke anything or stole anything.
Right.
It's really weird.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean? Like,
there was respect for
somehow,
Yeah.
in a moment when in our lives we weren't respecting much.
Right. Yeah.
We were kind of like animals.
Yeah.
But I kind of hear a little bit of that in your story too. Like Chris is saying, well, yeah, I'm okay if it jams out here for a minute.
Oh man. Yeah.
I'm not mad, you know?
Yeah. We didn't have a building, but we had a girls' school that we met in. And I think we would rehearse in there's a rehearsal studio called Farm Factory that was full of local bands and musicians. So it felt like we were connecting with people in the town all the time. So very similar to you. People would come in and out. But yeah, for sure, there would be moments in worship where we would keep playing and I'd be looking out going, is anyone going to grab a mic and stop this? You know, is this okay? Are we allowed to do this?
Okay, well, talk to me about this. Okay, so that's like the church worship thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's definitely in that moment where God is doing something in England.
Yeah.
You know, Delirious, Cutting Edge, Prosh, The Vineyard.
Yeah.
Wimber. That's a potent concoction of events.
Yeah.
Talk to me about what's happening in secular music. Like, are you guys like sort of got one foot in with whatever's happening locally in St. Albans? Was there a music scene, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, there was a thriving music scene. It was close to London, and we have something in the UK called the Toilet Circuit, which is just bad venues, you know, where you go around. And so Mark and I started a band that went through a few different names and iterations, but landed on Veracruz, and we still play shows and make records and rock as hard as is physically possible. But, you know, I'm 45 now, so it takes a little bit more of a toll.
You have to warm up.
Yeah.
Your body. You got to do some deep knee stretches.
That's it, man. But yeah, we felt really pulled towards that scene. And we still honestly do. Like, I feel I love that kind of thing. I love going to gigs, meeting other bands. It's such a formational thing for Christians. And we had some crazy gigs, and we would take every opportunity. We did a show once in London that was organised by someone that we didn't really know. Neil Leatherbarrow was his name. Neil. Shout out to Neil Leatherbarrow. So he was like, come down and play in Kilburn in this crazy old venue. He'd booked this huge venue, and we literally, you know, like every band has the story, but we played to Neil and the sound guy, and I think maybe Mark's dad was there.
So it was like three people.
Like, yeah, 5 is generous. Yeah, it was.
And you're rocking as hard as humanly possible.
And that was, so at the end of Neil was like, that was great, guys. I've got some friends in Poland that
It's going to send you to Poland.
Yeah. I've got friends in Poland. They run this crazy festival. You guys should go. And we're like, cool. You know, is there going to be more than 3 people? You know, so anyway, so he calls us up. We book flights and we drive to this amazing amphitheater in the middle of Poland. There's a lake, and there is like the biggest sound system we've ever seen in our life. Huge stage, and it's just like a hard rock festival. Bands are way heavier than us, so we're quickly changing the set. You know, what's the heaviest stuff that we have?
Yes.
But yeah, we would take anything. So that ended up with us doing a bunch of stuff in Eastern Europe and touring with some bands there, some super heavy Polish bands. It's so fun.
Were these Christian bands, or were they like sort of?
Some of them were, yeah.
Some of them, yeah.
We did a tour with a band called 2 Timothy 2-3.
Okay.
And they were, imagine like POD, that kind of thing. But they had 2 drummers, bass player that would stand in between the 2 drummers. One was this woman that we couldn't really say her name in Polish, so we just called her Bearheart because she was so rocking. She was like the powerhouse of the band, and there was like a more of a the finesse kind of guys, so double drummers, right? Yeah. And these guys were like, they'd been in a famous band, some of them called Acid Drinkers in Poland. And so they were famous in Poland. You'd walk down the street and people would stop them, and we were on this tour with them. And I think we were second on. The first band were called Non, and their record was called No One. And they were like the heaviest band. I think they were.
Is this like Norwegian death metal stuff?
It was getting into that.
It's in that territory.
Yeah, they were heavy, dude.
Yeah.
So yeah, we took every show, every invite, and then we started playing in the UK. We've done a lot of travel around Europe. It's looking back on it, it's incredible.
Okay, so let me do this. Let's just do lessons here for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because you have deep history with the Vineyard. You have deep history with the church, but then you also have deep history with rock and roll, especially at a time when there was rock and roll.
Yeah.
I mean, there is now too, but it wasn't the same.
No.
In the early 90s, rock and roll was the leading cultural edge.
Right.
Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. That was the edge of the edge.
Yeah.
Talk to me about just give me some lessons, like being a musician. I mean, you've played in the church and outside of the church. What do you want to say to church musicians? Because you've got all the experience. You're in the studio, you play with Non, and you tour with a woman named Bearheart.
Yeah.
What do we need to know?
That's such a great question. I wish I had time to think about that properly. I would say that churches is such a great, safe training ground for a heavy club where your feet stick to the floor. Church is just a really safe way of making mistakes, and you're with the family, right? Yeah. So, generally people are cheering you on. It's kind of like best man speech at the wedding. As long as you keep it clean, you can kind of get away with it, right? Even if it's terrible.
Yeah.
So it was, having those safe spaces and people encouraging you, where failure and mistakes are permitted. But also, honestly, those worship times where things were really free-flowing, and we'd be like, I don't know what's happening here, but we're chasing, I don't know, it feels like the presence of God is here, and we're chasing something. Let's just keep going. That stuff massively played into being a rock and roll band that was, in a...
So did you take that into the rock and roll venues?
Yeah, I think there were moments.
How does that translate?
For sure.
Yeah, like the improvisational moments, or you just get caught up in a moment. Let's let it roll.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the fun thing about being in a band is that you can forge a set that you rehearse till, the muscle memory is there, and you can play those songs in your sleep. But you can then build in moments of, hey, this might go long here. We might go left, or Mark might do he might start playing guitar behind his head, or jump off the subs, or he's what I love about Mark is he's a great front man. He's super unpredictable, but he also manages to straddle the worship thing in a similar way.
Yeah.
And it's just really exciting. We've done worship sets where there was no set. It's just like, hey, we're in B flat, and okay,
let's go.
Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah.
It's not
anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Turn the click off. Keep the click on. Who cares?
Yeah.
If guitars are slipping out of tune,
it's fine.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. But
drop it down further. Now we're in drop D.
Right. Be passionate. Take some risks.
Yes.
I that's what I would say to young church musicians. It's try and explore that space beyond the click, beyond the tracks,
beyond the grid.
Right. Yeah, and just try and feel safe. And it's funny, as a drummer in worship, sometimes I've just figured out this thing with Mark where I'm like, dude, I'm just going to keep playing until you signal. So, be visual. Be visual. Like, I'm constantly looking at those guys. You can get into it and you can have your eyes down and, you're not really following. So I think just looking for those cues,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out some of those things, but also have fun. Don't beat yourself up if you feel like it. it died. It does
It's
sometimes,
fine.
doesn't it? Yeah.
There's
it's
always
fine.
another moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people aren't really sitting there taking notes on the drums. They don't really care. They might become aware if things are like falling out of time or, but for the most part, they're listening to the singer. So the pressure's off a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Keep it, if in doubt, just hold time.
Yeah.
Keep people safe in the room,
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears here just for a second, because another part of what you do now has to do with documenting songs in the vineyard, making records.
Yeah.
What's a great vineyard song?
Oh my gosh. I mean, there's so many.
I mean, and I'm not even maybe looking for a specific song here, but I'm saying to you as someone who is curating those recorded moments, or choosing what maybe you and Steve feel like should be recorded. What to you, what clicks that button is, oh, this is great. This does something.
Oh, that's such a great question. Sometimes a song will come along that is saying something that it feels like the vineyard are feeling. And a songwriter, some of our writers have that gift of giving us the language that we need in that moment in the history of the movement that's so special. It's so exciting. Oh, Jay was talking about this last night. He was like, there is a sappiness to the way that we worship, a sweetness. Sometimes it's too much for some people. But to quote him last night, and I love him for saying this, I think that's the best of the vineyard, when it's super sweet. It's almost too much, the intimacy.
Jesus, I love you.
Right.
Yeah.
And we did that last night, and Tim Brown led it, and the room needed no encouragement. And for me, some of those songs are, I think that's what you're looking for. It's heartfelt. It's prophetic. It's truly intimate. But there is an intimacy. I think we're still figuring out what that means 50 years in, to this thing. And there is maybe an intimacy and praise that we're still trying to unlock as a movement. But I honestly, dude, songs like All Things Rise, those kind of songs, I've cried so many times listening to that song, just putting it on at work or playing it or someone leading it. There's a beautiful majesticness about, it's rich. There's a journey, and it just seems to encapsulate what it is to be in the vineyard. And when you hear the vineyard sing their own songs, whether it's here in a conference with however many people.
Man, we did this morning too.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, like this morning I just thought it was the AAPI session. They did such a great job this morning of just leading us to God in our own words.
Yeah.
And I just mean in our vineyard words.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. There's something truly special about that. And I mean, there are so many songs in the vineyard canon that do that thing. And I feel bad naming one when we could pull out so many great examples.
Well, I just want to maybe bring up one song that's kind of new. You guys tracked it not long ago, but No One Like You?
Yeah, yeah.
I adore that song.
Yeah.
And I was there when Annabeth and John wrote that.
Yeah.
I wasn't in the room when they wrote it. I was in another room writing a less good song. But I was speaking at the conference that night.
Yeah.
And John and Annabeth sort of like dropped it into the set.
Yeah.
And it killed.
Yeah, it did.
But it did that sort of intimate, sappy Jesus, I love you thing.
It did. Yeah.
And it made my heart come alive.
Yeah, me too. And once in a while you catch a wave like that, and it's a no-brainer, isn't it? It's like someone shoot the label manager if he doesn't do something with that. But they shared it. Well, just for context, folks, it's so rare because of the Atlantic Ocean and financial, restrictions around. It's not cheap to get Vineyard UK and US writers in the same space. So we jumped on that little horse last June.
Yeah.
You were over with Annabeth and Melissa, and so we pulled in some other friends from London area and some Vineyard UK writers, and it was just a beautiful time. I would love us to be able to do more.
I think we're going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's in our heart.
Yeah. There was something special about that, and it's incredible when songs travel, isn't it, in our movement, and there's just some heat on it, and you can't really explain that away, but yeah, it's good.
Well,
Good thing.
like just for me personally, in the last 5 or 6 years, some of my favorite moments have just been. It's for me. It's not even about the travel or the wanderlust, of going to see a new thing. But some of my favorite moments have been those times when the Vineyard UK and the Vineyard US have been together, even if it's the tiniest overlap, even if it's just one person in a room with a group of other people. But I just feel like God is doing something there with us. Yeah. And the more that we can bring that together, and even with Vineyard Canada, right? The roost is loose. Yeah. Let's get him in the room.
Yeah, right. It's so important.
But there is something when we all get together. Yeah. It feels profound for me.
Yeah, me too. And so my wife Kate and I, we came to Texas and stayed in a house there. We're part of the Sugarland Vineyard in Texas for 6 months, and I worked for Casey in the studio, and it was just a beautiful time for us as a couple. But I would say we felt instantly welcome by you guys, instantly at home. And I think when you walk into a Vineyard worship room, actually wherever you are in the world, there's a whole bunch of things that you have in common. You understand the values of what we're doing that are underpinning the worship. Mm-hmm. What's really precious in our community, I think, is people really are for each other. I don't see it hardly ever anymore. The kind of musicians, we're an insecure bunch, right?
We can be territorial.
Yeah, we can be territorial. We can be competitive. We can allow our insecurity to get in the way. But just less and less, I run into that. And Kate and I have got deep love for Vineyard people here in the US, and I always just sense this is like a common unspoken bond. It's really hard to articulate. I'm not doing it justice, but there's something that pulls us together, like you were saying, in the Vineyard, in worship. And I felt so at home in the room last night. I love what God's doing here. I love what God's doing in, Vineyard in the UK. It probably feels and looks a little different, but there is this commonality that pulls us together, that glues the thing together, and that's worth fighting for.
It totally is. One of the things I notice when I go to England, and it's true here, but it's so obvious to me when I'm in England, is the joy and the friendship that you guys have. And I think it's because the island is just smaller. Right. You guys are compressed. Yeah. And so it feels a little easier for you guys to be together. Yeah. Here in America, it's so big. Right. And there's definitely those pockets of community here in the Vineyard in the U.S. But it's not and it happens when we're all together at like this national conference too. Yeah. But it's different in England. I feel it. I'm like, man, the sense of camaraderie that you guys have. Yeah. And the sense of joy. That's cool. Really cool. It's profound. I notice it every time I show up. I'm like, oh man, this is so cool.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I love
everyone kind of knows each other, and
yeah.
It's that feeling of team. I'm always impressed by what you guys have, and I'm actually challenged by it.
Oh, cool.
I'm like,
all right.
But it's just very obvious to me, and I think it's because I don't know. You get in the car 2 hours, you can kind of go see anybody. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas here, you get in the car and drive 2 hours, and maybe you didn't even make it out of your state. It's just different.
Yeah, it is different. Yeah, well, I mean, we have a radio station in the UK where they can do the whole traffic forecast thing in like 5 minutes. Yeah. So, no, it's an advantage for sure. I think the geography. But I feel like we've learnt so much from you guys over the years about relationship, preferring one another, singing each other's songs. We are so blessed by what you guys started in, here and continue to steward. And so many times, dude, we've stolen things. Literally, like, can we take that event and just steal that?
Steal everything. Steal everything. But you were talking a moment ago just about that sense of connection that you have no matter where you go around the world. I mean, I feel the same thing when I go to see Maria and the Vineyard Nordic crew.
Yeah.
Or Edgar.
Yeah.
When Edgar comes and hangs with us from Kenya.
Yeah.
Or Burguño.
Right,
in Chile.
I don't know David, but I love his vibe.
What a gem.
Yeah.
What a gem.
Okay.
Yeah, like David shows up here and it's not, it's weird. It's like, yes, David's a special guest.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of like, it's just our long lost brother who lives halfway around the world. And what he brings is so it's just in the vibe. Like it's here. So I love that.
So good, man.
Beautiful. Yeah. Jimmy, let's end with this. What do you just want to say to Vineyard worship leaders here in the States? Like you're the outside observer. So sometimes you can see things that we can't see, or maybe you just have a thought for us.
From my, standpoint, I feel like the Vineyard is in good shape. I feel like Vineyard worship kind of figured out what we're doing, like who we are and where we are in the grand swirl of Christian music. I think we still have something really significant to offer the church and the people outside the church. I love the pursuit of intimacy here. I love the freedom. Even it is really spread out. You have some distance challenges, but I see really strong relational connection here. That relational work of hanging out, staying up late, it's a beautiful thing, and it's kind of how the Vineyard it's what we do. It's how we figure things out, and
sometimes it feels like the meeting is just the context for the hangout that happens afterwards, right?
It totally does.
It's like the real thing is the hangout.
Absolutely. And wine is often involved, and
thank you, Lord.
But I think there's let me just tell you this. So my Uber driver who just brought me in this morning to the conference he turned out to be a Christian, and he was asking me, what am I doing here? Where are you going? And I was trying to explain the Vineyard to him, and I keep thinking about what Jay was saying last night about the sweetness, and it's probably offensive to some people. I remember John Barnett once saying, if you've been dragged back from the jaws of hell by the belt buckles, you will sing anything to the Lord. You really will.
Yeah.
And I've had some dark moments in my life where I feel like Vineyard songs are the things that I can remember, and that they become a prayer in a dark moment. Let me just real quick story. So, a dear friend of ours, just before COVID, he was kind of a father figure in our church. He got brain cancer, and it was a really rapid decline. It was like 6 months, and he passed away. But just before he did pass away, he would have been mid-70s, big part of Riverside Vineyard back in the day in London that sent it out a ton of churches. And Kate and I went to visit him in the hospice, and he was at death's door, but they had a little chapel there, and he said to Kate, "Where's your machine?" Because he was struggling with words at that point, like, "Why didn't you bring your guitar?" And we were laughing about that, and then we walked down together to this chapel, and we lit some candles, just the three of us in there, and he wanted to sing songs, and we sung "You Are Here." We sung "Just Like You Promised." Isn't he? It was honestly one of the most beautiful moments of my life, and he could barely speak, but he could remember those songs, and I feel emotional thinking about it now. But I just feel like there's such a rich heritage that God has given the vineyard. Songs and worship is such a huge piece of that, and vineyard worship leaders in the US, I would just hold on to that precious stuff. You know, keep digging it out, and it's part of who we are. It's super important. Let's never lose that. If we do, I think we're done.
Amen.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to say it better than that, Jimmy. Dude, thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming to the conference, too.
Oh, dude, it's a total privilege. Love you guys. Love being here.
Amen.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Peace.
Thanks.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, Instagram at The Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.